Supposed to not have a religious agenda.
Because I walked in, I did not hear the complete sentence.
Have free access to.
Yeah.
You use on Audible, you have free access to it.
Can you get it on Audible? What's the song about?
We put more on this
Oh,
one. But it certainly wouldn't last more than 20
Okay, I've
minutes.
just started the recording. I don't think we have anyone joining us virtually today, so this will just be post. Welcome to the second somewhat monthly meeting of the Colonial History Interpreters Club. On the schedule tonight is a couple of things. Sharon's going to talk to us about doing research on 18th century people.
Yeah, sort of some things to think about when you're researching as far as not just your person, but some things around that can give you some scope and depth to your person.
And then also we'll be working on 18th century greetings. So we'll get some practice. There you go.
It's the first thing in the book.
So we do have one item of business, and that is we've had a request to have some kind of family discount rate. Now we can't discount the insurance because we just passed that cost through, but we certainly could have some kind of group rate for club membership. So you guys don't get to vote on this. We don't really have bylaws that tell us how to vote, but actually, I think the way we're founded, Sharon decides everything. So, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's, if we're wanting to bring people in, I say make it as easy as possible. Be all inclusive.
So, what should we do?
What do we do with our funds that is not the insurance?
We don't know yet.
Well, so,
So we have about $300.
okay, now, refresh my memory, how much are we paying and how much goes to insurance?
So insurance is $10 a year per person,
Okay.
and then club membership is currently $10 a year per person. So I think if we do a family, it should be maybe at the point where you have 3 people, that's break even, maybe 4 people, I don't know. But the question is, where do you? Yeah, I think 2 people is 2 people.
Because the insurance is so much. I mean, a family of 3 have $30 in insurance, where I would have 10.
Right.
So I feel like the discount should compensate down enough to where, not to where they're paying no membership, but just being aware that insurance, since it is per person and we can't change that,
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah,
trumps what the dues may be.
Well, and if we're not knowing what we're gonna do with the other money, we're charging.
Well, one of the things we've talked about is bringing out some reenactors from Williamsburg.
Okay.
So
Well, what if one person is $10 above the insurance and then $5 for anybody after that in the family?
So 2 people would be
15.
15, and then, well, no, this would be going forward. So I don't know, that seems reasonable too. So even couples would get a discount.
Yeah, I like. Yeah,
What's the general feeling about that?
I shouldn't vote because I'm just.
Personally, I'm thinking now it's such a little tiny bit for a year.
Right, but it's $10. That's fine. I don't have to worry about the 3 or 4.
Family.
Yes, right. We do have multiple children.
Right.
Yeah.
So $10 for an individual and then $5 for anyone else in that.
I think it should be $5 for a couple and then less. Because for kids, it's sort of educational.
For $10 per adult person and $25 for a family.
Yeah, that's an idea. So if you have,
I mean, that can be unlimited family members.
yeah,
You know,
it's sort of like that because
you're paying
you should
$10 for each adult, and then go and repopulate the earth as many as you want. $25, you know. I don't know. Right? Just a thought. I don't know.
Well, how about we put those suggestions and send it out
Yeah,
to people
make a
who
decision.
know we just decided here?
People
I
who
like
match-
the
You folks
family,
think?
I like the family. I think you could do 3. I think you could actually do 3 things. You could do a 15 for a couple and 25 for a family. Unlimited children.
There's all sorts of different possibilities.
Yeah.
And then we can always change it if we find that we need more money for other stuff.
Right.
We will say, that's what we started with here, this is great, you know, we want to encourage families.
Because
And
I am not the best expert. I just happen to have been there and observed a lot. But I definitely know people that do this a lot more often.
Well, and we're so new
So-
into this that we probably have no comprehension of.
As far as for money, but down the road.
I like a simpler structure. $10 a person, 25 per family.
Okay.
okay,
Well, I get the part.
I mean, that's, as long as we decide on something, I think this is great. Something that accommodates families, I think. that's
That
great.
means we can have our other 2 boys join it. It's like that.
Yeah.
All right.
I know. It's okay.
Is there any other business? So when I invited Finchers, I said, you know what, it seems like we should have some kind of policy that says that you can come once and decide if you want to become members. So shall we also kind of accept that as a,
That sounds like fair.
okay?
Thanks, Dan.
It's almost like it's together.
Is that what's like? All right, well then, let's listen. There's some bread. This is bread from Abigail's Oven. They're the ones that run the bakery at the festival.
Oh, fun.
We taught,
Oh, they have it at the farmer's market
Yeah.
every week.
yeah, we taught them how to make the bread, and then they went and made a business out of it. And they've
Oh, I
this is,
didn't know
I think, a
there was
jalapeno
connection.
cheddar.
I should
Oh,
support
fun.
them more. I live a house away from the park, so
Oh,
it's
right.
like, for months and months, I see them as there. So I'll
I
have
actually
to
know where they're based.
Oh, really?
Try it.
It's
Let's
fun.
do
At least they're there now. Who
Yeah,
knows?
we wouldn't mind.
But I don't
It'd
think
be my
there's-
pleasure.
Oh gosh, Gatlinburg, which is in the Appalachian Mountains, don't have many wildfires just because there's so much rain back east. But sometime last summer, I think, they had a bad one right in the Smoky Mountain Park, and it went straight down Gatlinburg. And that was like one of my first jobs during the college break was in Gatlinburg. And so, just having a wildfire was so weird to hear about there. And then secondly,
Well,
so
they are
it
called the
does
Smoky
make
Mountains.
it's a different,
I'll read on it.
it's more misty. That should have been actually the real name, is Misty Mountains. But
All right.
anyways, so,
I guess just one more update. Some guesses.
well, I missed
This is the book that we're kind of using as our initial text, 18th Century English as a Second Language. It was published by the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. We're not quite sure where to get the print copy. We got this in Williamsburg, but we can't find it online just
I'm
now.
gonna ask my
So we have some connections, but you can't get it on probably, but you can get it on Google Play. Electronic copy on Google Play, like $6. So
Let me ask.
that's an option.
Like I said, cheap.
All right.
Right by the bookstore.
If it's there, we may just.
I have to go all the way. One of the things about the book, though, and I mentioned this before, so I'll mention it. If you get it, you're looking through it. I do feel it's a lot of conversation. Like this is how with someone that knows the same language. So us as a club could communicate, but if we're working on interpreting for people of this time period, they couldn't respond back. So it can be a little limiting. It does give great example sentences for some of the adverbs, adjectives, and so I really loved that it gave me a source for knowing that there were different meanings of words. So there's just some things. It actually is a huge section on African American language, which I was really excited about as we are working on that project. I'd like to go back a little since you do the coopering and just talk about one thing that I mentioned last time about first person and third person interpretation. Because trades is one of those really iffy situations. A first person interpretation is where you take a person of history. It's not have to be a famous person. Someone told me, I did a little training for the festival that's going on next weekend, and they said, I don't know Lucy Level of Paradise. I've never heard of her. And I'm like, oh, she's real, because that's who I portray. Does not have to be a famous person, just so you know. But nobody will know who you are, so you have to be prepared to talk about that. But you portray their thoughts, their processes, the things they did. You explain that to people that don't know. But there are a couple of cardinal rules. One, you're not dead because you are still talking about your life. You also can only talk about your life to the point of your age. So you choosing a person, you may have hopes of doing something in the future. You may have, I endeavor to do this, marry and have children, which pretty much all women would have talked about. But you cannot talk about what you're going to do in the future if you were Abigail Adams. You can't talk about being first. You can't talk about being first lady because people would look at you and be like, "Yeah." And it's,
so that brings a question to mind because she died in childbirth and she was only 20, somewhat 30. She was 30, so I'm a little older than.
Yeah.
So do I need to pick a different
No, I think
person?
you're okay.
Do I need to pick a different person? Obviously, if she died, I only go to the point where, oh yes, I'm 50 years old, but no, really, I'm only 20 and I'm, going to Florida, have my second child die. So
I would say pick another person.
oh, I can't.
I know, and that's I know God's saying not, but
So then I would maybe want to change. I mean,
yeah, definitely can do third person about her. I'm sorry, but it's just, it would be, and for you, it's not as, like, someone probably would not get that as much as a huge age gap as the young girl speaking about being first lady.
right.
Or
right.
even,
I guess they'd have to go
not
find
Paul,
that she
Jack,
died,
Jack talking about being president.
I would tell them that I died during childbirth.
Right, because you're not dead.
Dying, so they really have to research me to find that. Oh, she was 50 years old.
Sure, and of course you could always make a fictional character that is based everything on.
Right, that didn't die. Well, it
I'll
just,
have to think
you
about
have,
that.
right, that's the one thing about interpretation too, is you really have to think about who you want to be and how you want to do that. And I thought you were going to say she died like at 20. And if she was a little older, you probably could get away with it. I don't know. I haven't had that because Lucy died in her 60s, so I haven't hit that yet. I'm getting closer though. I think about it,
Can you just
That's true. That's true. They did. But that's first person interpretation where everything is based on what you know in the moment that you can accurately portray. And I'm not saying, it's not as noticeable as having portraits of Abigail and John Adams. It's a character that's a family member. You can definitely. I don't know.
She's probably much less known. So.
Right. So it's totally up to you. And since it's relative, it's just you have to choose, because the number one rule is you sort of love the person you're doing it. Right. So that's fine. That's first person interpretation. What problem with trades is someone comes up to you, asks about what you're coopering, bucketing, barreling, whatever we call it. You would have to describe it without breaking that time warp. You are describing it to someone who, in your mind, is coming to purchase the bucket. And so everyone would have known how it was done, if that makes sense, basically. Most people, because many people made their own buckets, families, so it becomes a little harder because you're having people come up that have no idea. And it's sort of what happens with, the calligraphy. Daniel, when he comes up and he tries to say, didn't you learn in school? And they just look at him like he's crazy. And he says, I always have to break and just say, what's your name? it really doesn't work for him to try first person because everyone would have known how to write a script.
Right.
And so again, you're having conversations from your point of view. So that's why trades is so important. And every trade in Williamsburg is a third person interpretation. They're in costume, they're doing something of the past, but they're able to talk to you as being in the same time period. They are merely portraying it. They're not a living interpretation.
So
As opposed to, say, though, the printer, because that was a trade and he's portraying
It
a
was,
person.
but
for you.
that's why I said
Hold on a second.
it's good to have the two together.
So what you're saying is that at the trades, if you've got the Cooper in first person, it's good to have someone there as third person who can.
I see.
An interpreter. And
So
what
maybe
has
that's
to
what-
happen
that's what
is
you-
your first person has to sort of acknowledge that, and it just goes to, we talked a lot today about sort of conversation and how you guide people. Your first person printer needs to have a phrase or a thought process, either he's too busy or he needs to attend to business, so that John may address your questions. And you need to hand that off as a first person interpreter, because that otherwise you're breaking character. So you have to have why you're saying John needs to address your questions. You have to have something you're doing that you would have done as Isaiah. You need to go speak to someone or do business, and you would definitely be in charge of the print shop. He was the printer, right? I mean, he was not just working. So your staff.
So in other words, to take time out of his printing to describe what's being done wouldn't have been done because that.
Well, if he can answer questions in first person, that becomes the issue.
But most people back then might not have been asking those questions.
It's the same thing if someone comes up to you and asks where the bathroom is. You can't say, oh, it's over there, because you don't know from your mind frame what a bathroom is. So if in first person they ask you about, well, and a lot of times you can say, well, I perhaps, out here it's easy. I talk about the savage area that they just are ignorant. But Lucy's very crazy, so I get away with it. But you can say, perhaps out here the paper is not of that quality, but I gather my paper from this source. But you just have to know that moment in your conversation with someone that doesn't speak your language when you can't. And when you can't answer it anymore in first person, and that's why I'm talking, because that's what you all are, it's recommended to have someone that John works for you. That's your relationship. And again, you can have mutual conversation in 18th century, so that's a good thing you're going to get the book. But if you're interpreting, John needs to interpret your questions because they're not getting you. And when I did Lucy, I always had a building attendant that sat in front. All they did was unlock the doors and light the candle, sit for an hour and a half, turn on, blow out the candle, and lock the door. That was their entire job. I did that for years. It's an easy gig. They were my third person every time because they were just in costume, locking and unlocking the door. So when they got tired that I wouldn't tell them where the bathroom was, they would step in every time and go, "It's down that way," because they knew I wasn't going to.
And then,
So-
don't you have to decide how important is it for you to be the first person character, depending on what you are trying to accomplish
Yes,
with your part?
that is it. Well,
Because
if you're portraying a person at all, you need to be first person.
Okay.
If you are third person and you're talking about what happened in the past and who might have done that, that is not you. That is, you are not that person.
Therefore, there's no character. that we
Right.
wrote.
Right, you can talk about it all. So it is a conscious decision going into, actually, any event that you're a part of, you should say. And you can even collaborate, like with your print shop. You wanted to do first person, and there was another one that could take the third, like your wife or something. You decide before you have people in front of you, because then you're breaking. You say, today I'm going to do third person because we've had a lot of questions about this, or whatever. It's a very conscious decision before you begin any event. because your mannerisms should not be first person. Your third persons don't do any time travel either.
Festival this year, then, didn't
No,
I?
it's not a cloning it. It's just we didn't have third person either. It's never been something we talked about, sort of how do we engage? And we should actually, with the festival, know who is first person so we can seek them out and have conversations with others. That, I mean, that's a part of it. We don't know. Williamsburg, there's a group, that's their job. That's whatever team you would call it in corporate world. Those are the interpreters, and these are third person. It's very defined. So it's just a matter of when events that you decide. I knew at the Eric Gavel that I was doing first person completely. And I had a volunteer came up and asked me a question about Washington, and I talked about Washington as Lucy. I have no idea if that's what answer she wanted, to be honest. I was sort of like, okay, but I'm not Sharon, and so I hope that was worthwhile for you because this is who. So it is a very, I just say, and part of that can be, we get into dress and how you stand, and some of those things that change when you're in first or third. So in a trade, it's the same thing as Gov. Very important to be clear of whether you're going to do third person completely and have no first person, which still means you can engage with the first person, which I actually like with the trades at our festival because they're intermittent, where at Williamsburg they're sort of hidden. And so the first persons never make it there, to be honest. Well, I take that back. The Silversmith Getty is sort of right there. They may have a Getty first person, but most of the time they don't. Trades are sort of they have a whole program of their own. But I, as Lucy, could come and inquire about a bucket, but you would still be third person speaking to me as if I was Lucy, which again, you're time warping. You're the only one that gets time warp. It's third person interpreters.
So would a third person interpreter use?
No. That's the things that really determine your first person is your body, your posture, your tone, the language you use, how you greet others, things that, and that's where we're talking about greeting. So I wanted to bring that simply because with trades, it's sort of, you get to decide. I like third person for trades. Like I borrowed silver stuff from the guy selling silver because I wanted a picture of ice water, so I went and get, and I had a table, and I went to him totally as Lucy, and he didn't, which was fine, but he knew I was acting the part, and he was like, "Go right ahead," and so that's just what you can do, but you can also choose to learn language so that you can switch off, like we were talking about, so that you still get some practice with first person as well.
So because in the Goodbridge we also do
Oh.
if she wanted to be a apothecary, she could be completely first person doing
Right.
that with other people around her who could
Good answer
interpret.
questions.
That would be much more fun.
Right. And then you can definitely, and it's no problem when people are asking questions to say, I do not understand your language. Or I do not understand your question. Or, just, and then that's when the third person sort of jumps in, So it's a very, it tends to work, it makes a good relationship. So I recommended that for Gov, and so I just wanted you to be aware of first and third. When you're researching, which I wanted to talk about, because we know sort of, I would assume, I shouldn't make that assumption, that we all have an idea of how to research a person. Or, I wanted to know about Lucy. I'm just going to Google Lucy. I find out she has a biography. I go to Google Books, I think is where I found it, or I went to the library. I don't know, some weeks where. And I read about Lucy. I read her book. I read her letters. That's sort of, we all sort of know how to do it. We watch movies about John Adams. Okay, I'm a movie person or the book person, I've been. But I do look up official documents, original documents, to get my historical context. So would I be right to say that we all sort of have an idea how to do a person? Okay.
How to read biography.
Right, basically. The letters, one thing that we don't think of with people as much is other people's letters. So you could Google Thomas Jefferson letter Paradise Problem, because he has an original letter where he talks about the issue with Lucy's tobacco land and money. And in that, he calls it the Paradise Problem. I don't know if I would get it. It's in her biography, so that's how I found it. But you might actually find it with Jefferson. So even just knowing Lucy Leadville Paradise, Thomas Jefferson, I might find that. So you want to look at who your peers might have been in that area. She's easy because she was Virginia landowner. That's fairly simple. But you could look up, when I was doing African American, I wanted to find the plantation owner that's mentioned in the advertisement that I found as an original document, and found him listed in his military as a patriot with 3 other plantation owners of that same area. So I researched where he was from. That's how the landowner came about. So I then knew his relationship with those around him because they were listed as patriots. So that meant I could go back to who else might have run away and who else might not have. So there's a lot of ways to research that. I would research coopering. You should know why you're called a cooper. And I'm not picking on you, but I'm not the best researcher. I'm not a book reader, but I would want to know, because I want to know everything about Lucy. I actually went to the museum to see what she would have been in, or treatment in her mental illness. You know, I wanted to know what Lucy, when she was put into that hospital, what treatment she would have been given, because it helps me know more about her. I had to do it because we were turning her into a ghost, which that's another story. But it actually was very beneficial to sort of, not that I portrayed her last few years because she was crazy, so I really can't walk around the street. I could portray her pretty old when she's crazy, and I did, but I can't talk about the 2 years. And if someone asks, you know, about what about the hospital, I would have said, well, I am well of mind. I have no need for that hospital.
So that was a question, that if somebody came to their shop, their exhibit, and said, why is this called a coopering shop? Would the third person have to answer that? Or would, okay.
If we're doing first person.
No, third. Oh, if
you're doing first, then the third person has to say, well, they're called coopers.
Well, I take that back. The first person could answer
You say, oh,
if they said it, if they sounded surprised. Because people of that period should know why it's called coopering. We don't, but we're not 18th century. But it also depends on if your person wants to be, it's not continuous.
I mean, it may not.
Maybe not, because cooping's been around since Egypt. So where the name came from, that may be.
But there wouldn't have been anyone in the 18th century asking, I don't think. Because they were doing it themselves, too. I mean, they had slaves doing it. Because your slaves would just be a cooper. You would have slaves you would have assigned to do that on your plantation. So it may have been, and that's the thing, we're from a mindset of things that people would ask. Here, the things that even if they didn't know the name, they understood it, that they wouldn't have asked. And so you can act surprised if you answer in first person, you know, and address, but you can address it even in, you know, even as a laughter sort of, I've not thought of what it means. Do you not have a cooper, you know, on your plantation? Perhaps he would know. And that's why I called it today in the presentation. It's not divergence, I used it in court. But when you're asking a question that would be hard for a first person, you actually go to something that you get into sheep mentality a bit. And I always, as Lucy, say things that they would agree with. You know, I pick on dress a lot because Lucy was really, and gentry women would have been very aware of fashion and would have been of a class that they could have talked down to anyone that was dressed inappropriately. Lucy would have. So I always talk about the lack of cloth, and perhaps you do not have the coin for that, but you are exceedingly dressed inappropriately. And I said, would you not agree? I say that so much because what happens is that's the teaching moment. Because what happens is they're like, you know, in their mind, like, I'm dressed fine, you know, but you're saying, and they're like, I agree, because they see me in 3 layers of clothing. So that's the engagement process of the learning. I'm not saying I am wearing.
Or is that when they're saying, are you very hot?
Oh, I always laugh at them. I would say, well, if you were dressed appropriately, mistress, I would assume you to be as hot as I. But I see your lack of cloth. Is that your choice or lack of coin? I totally go away from, that's the engagement part.
I wish I had known that this summer because I had that.
Oh.
Asked that a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a beautiful day, isn't it? The sun is shining, definitely.
Well, and that's again something Lucy would have done. Totally would have said, well, of course I'm warm, but I see why you are not. I mean, that's just Lucy. That's just, and then that was my charity work. To actually find everything that needed cloth, and I was making a list that I could gain, because I have coin, to gather cloth from the millinery in Williamsburg to send out to this savage country that is so short on cloth. So yeah, that's, I do, but it's, I do a lot of, would you agree? And it's, they're like, I had these 2 girls that are like, isn't it terrible? My ankles show. I'm like, yes. The soldiers are there, do not go near them. Oh, I won't. And they were getting into it. You know, it's like you totally, I had a girl that had her hair down. And actually, this is one thing I love. Anne brought this up. And that is what interpretation and reenactment. George Washington would never have talked to a woman he did not know about her hair being down. Never. It was inappropriate, right? There's no way. But
would
he
not have spoken to a lady.
no, would not have told her hair was down and how she was unmarried and don't go near the soldiers. He would never. George Washington, I mean, and no man of respect would have talked to a woman that way. And what I do is Lucy is because she's catty. But what he did it, and that's why that is interpretation. He started a conversation, so he bent who George Washington was, and it still tied in because he was worried about his soldiers, which was very Washington. But he addressed, so I latched onto the hair, and I had a girl that had her hair down, and she was with a mother, and it was like, oh, you're looking for a husband? Yes, handsome. I do not know, and she had on really short. But anyway, I was like,
are you catcall, right?
Oh, right, exactly. So I was really talking about, so I saw her later, and she's holding hands with this guy. She totally was like, I won't go looking for a husband. So she's holding hands with this guy, and I go, you found one! That's always that's the key to the festival and the Roaming, is remembering some of those conversations you've had. But it's, again, you're diverting from the odd questions. So if you can, as a Cooper, address that funny that I'm not sure there is a man on earth that understands where Cooper came from, but I'm sure you're aware of how to make a bucket as I'm doing now.
From the middle. And you wouldn't have known that. You would not have known that.
Did you just look that up?
Cool. And research, because and even though you're not going to answer the question, you now know that you, as a first person Cooper, would not have known, which is still valuable research. Right, and that is valuable research. So sometimes when you're researching, it is not just about this one person. Then you probably have a family legend about that. Then you probably have a family, the thing that was passed down when you as a child at 5 said, why are we called a Cooper, Dad? I mean, exactly. Yeah. So and again, that's the research that I find to be very eye-opening to how to address, because if I don't need to know, then fine, I don't have to know. So, you know, if it's something I should know, then I need to figure out what my person would feel about that and how I would deal with that. So in researching, I just wanted to talk about being open to different kinds of your peers, the community, where they would have come from, military, if you're male. The 5th generation aspect is key for trades. Just sort of knowing all of that, because you can go back to your 5th grant and sort of look at trades in his time period. What would he have said?
When I refer to master.
Oh.
Here's my master.
Oh, okay.
I'm the apprentice.
But you probably should want to compare
A
apprentice.
little old for an apprentice.
So are you.
Oh, you're an apprentice. You call him an apprentice?
Yeah.
They actually at Windsor they're called apprenticeships, but I don't know if they address each other. There's a journey. Actually, it would be more of a journey.
That's who he chose, was somebody who actually did apprentice for
When he was young.
Uh-huh.
So you're now a journeyman, possibly, but you can speak.
Your work has made you look much older.
You
than
can
are.
speak of your time as an apprentice. You would not say, I'm an apprentice now, but you can speak of being an apprentice if you're doing first person. The time when I was, and we assume that you just stayed on, which is, but you would not say, I'm an apprentice of ICE.
You came back to visit your.
No, he can be working.
Sure. Yeah.
He just never left. He's just not 11. Right. Right. So it's just you talk about that time period, but you're not an apprentice anymore. You're a printer. You're just not the print owner. Right. So that's just, and it's the same thing. You're not an apprentice. And the reason I say that. But this is an important fact though, because when you have an 11-year-old child that is engaging and being taught that he should be looking at an apprenticeship because he's 11, I'm engaging him in a historical story. This is a fact. If you're 11, you should be looking at an apprenticeship. Then he goes to Cooper and you say you're an apprentice, and now we've given him wrong history. So that's why I
we're
say
doing third person. We're telling, yeah, would have been 11.
right. But if you're third person, you're not a character. That I mean, you are a Cooper. You are participating in the trade of coopering. You are doing what they did.
You wouldn't be a fictional
No, you're not a character. You cannot be an apprentice if you're not 11 or 12.
So much more.
Oh,
So,
yeah, because that's when they start. I just address this when they start. I have no idea how long they stay.
okay, so here's one thing I'd love to do. Oh, perhaps you're here to apply to be an apprentice. I'm not even sure what the right word is for that. Probably
I was going to say, you have the bug. You should have left.
not. Sure.
Apply. Let's use the word apply.
So, so I'll ask, first we should find out if you understand the terms of employment for an apprentice. Right? We'll ask questions. You understand how many days a week the apprentice will have to work at? They always say 7. Well, no, of course, we will not work on the Lord's Day. But every other day, so it would be 6 days. Now, how many hours a day? We kind of work up to 12 hours a day. We try to get there. But that's probably not a conversation that you really would have had. But is that something that I probably shouldn't do if I'm in first person?
You really are bridging a third person there, because if you, as Isaiah, wanted to speak to a child about applying for apprenticeship, you would just say, your terms of your employment are as any normal apprenticeship.
Right.
And they would say what it is, and I'm like, well, I don't know who you choose to work for, so 12 hours is required here. You can do it a little differently.
But my kids don't often ask the right questions. Yeah.
But in truth, you could actually address that to the parent Because they're going to make the arrangement with the
Right.
parent.
You would make it with them. But the thing is, you don't want, the thing with interpretation is, no, they're never going to ask the right question because they don't know. You don't have to do that's a third person, that's like a history lesson, doing that. You know, you guess. And we think that that's good because we think we're engaging them in that. But what changes when you're doing interpretation is it alters a perception in their mind. They're not in a classroom. They're speaking to someone of a different period that is wanting to hire them. So now, all of a sudden, instead of being among 4 or 5 kids in a room, or 20 in a room, that's the teacher saying, how long do you think they work? Those same things that you mentioned, they're now like, oh my gosh, she's going to do work. And so it becomes very real. When you say, well, 8 hours, Dad works 8 hours, so he's going to say, you know, when you say, how many hours do you expect to work? And they say 8. You've been working for the 8 is acceptable. My print shop is 12 hours. Are you agreeable with that? And that's the total. And I ask a lot of agreeables, and it's hilarious because it's cheap mentality. And if they say no, then you have just as engaging to say, well, I cannot hire you. Perhaps you should try the Cooper. I hear they're more lenient in their hours. And that, again, I guarantee that 11-year-old kid's going to go, where's the Cooper? Where's the guy? I'm going to go find the Cooper. And he's going to ask the same question. That's the kind of coordination of first person. Right, because third person are the people that are sitting there going, I mean, you honestly, and those are usually the parents, not the kids. Kids get into the whole role playing. It's natural for them. The parents are like, is he really going to put me to work? I mean, and that's when your third person steps in and says, well, apprenticeships at that time period, they would have worked 6 days. You know, totally. And but the child is going to learn because it's personal.
The public really likes first person.
Oh, because it's more engaging.
Yeah,
it's personal.
I've seen that.
It is personal. I go up to you and I tell you don't have enough cloth. How different is that than saying in the classroom saying they would have worn a shift and a petticoat and a gown, and their kids are all like, okay, right. But I go to you and I say, are you poor? Your ankles are showing, and all of a sudden you're embarrassed. I've seen it. It's hilarious because they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And that is when it becomes personal, and that learning begins. And sometimes they're just getting into the role play, but and sometimes they really are just sort of like, I think with the kids, it's a lot more like, I thought it was okay. You know, they look at the parent, I'm not sure. And I do not pick on the kids about their clothes because there is more of right, but they're just children, and so children, it's okay. For them, it's different things like how many hours would you work is actually a great thing to address and ask personally. If you wanted to do more of the group, then that's more of a third person because you can address more like a teacher.
So like for them, perspective on that, Washington, the company, which was trying to go back to he got such lackluster recruitment that he had to start bringing in the directors of society. These were guys who only had a shirt and trousers, didn't necessarily have stockings, and they didn't have waistcoats. And he wrote letters to the governor complaining that these were undressed men because they didn't have a waistcoat. So without the waistcoat, he considered them unclothed.
With men, I do a lot of, because I have a story I tell at my tent, and I've told it about a man. It's actually it's Master Fauntleroy. You'd have to hear the whole story. But he's a dandy. He saves Mr. Squeakbottom from drowning in the river. And he walks like this. And I always address because he must have his best foot forward. But before I tell the story, I'll ask the kid doing it. I'll say, which do you think is your best cat? And I don't say sex, this best. For every man must know the most attractive cat for the ladies, because that's where it came from. And so I do that with the men, but it's not the ankle showing.
And actually what I do with them is and again, they go along with it, which is hilarious to me every time. They'll go, am I right? You know, and I'll always pause just a moment. I'll go, is that your good wife? And they'll say yes. I said, do you agree? You know, I work it for all I can, but I engage them in which is their best attractive cat. And again, I'm teaching best foot forwards, where it came from, and why when they bow, then when they step back into a bow, because that's the thing that with the greetings I wanted to mention for the men, that I've seen it tried a couple of ways. It's not foot forward and then like go forward. You actually leave your foot where it is and step back into your bow, and you turn your foot a bit because of the cat. You're showing your cat. That's why stockings were so important, because, and men were more
They
great
put
about
padding.
Yes, they
put
padded.
padding in their stockings.
So men, like how women nowadays, women wear stockings to be more attractive. Well, it actually all started with the men and stockings. So yeah, exactly. That's the way it was. So those are the kind of things, you know, and like I said, I know in every core of me what Lucy would say and what she would. I love the fact she is crazy. It gives me a lot of leeway.
Oh, yeah.
But I do believe, knowing your class, that there are some things, Gentry would have definitely spoken to children of any class and reprimanded. Certain, I think, again, it's that George Washington license, a bit that Lucy makes fun of them, but you could, as many characters, be concerned over the lack of cloth and the dress, and that would still be appropriate. So you have to find, like I said, for Lucy, fashion was a big thing for her, how they looked, and that she knew everything. So it's very easy for me to talk about fashion. For you, you might want to know what's an important aspect, especially as a loyalist. That's a different kind of thing that might be passionate, because I also don't get into politics as Lucy, unless I'm asked. And then I'll say, well, of course I'm a patriot. I am a Virginia Left. What else would I be? But her father, Philip, actually moved to England and divorced her. So she is a patriot in spite of her family. And again, I know that, and I know it well. So researching, which makes her so much fun. I used to do this when I did the Mistress Week bottom. I asked for a hat from the costume shop that was just one they were going to throw away. So I have to tell us, it was too fun. And I got this debilitated, like, straw hat I had gotten from Michael's, this bird's nest, like with a bird. It was like, and I put it on the hat, like attached it. So I would stand in the back as my group was coming into the room. And that's also, I was talking about, so many of our storytellers there would wait and watch everybody come in the room. And then the minute everybody was sitting down, oh, I see you have arrived. I'm serious. And that's when we were discussing about actors and storytellers, and they were actors, and they did a great job with their stories, but there was no engagement. And so I couldn't stand that. So Lucy I would sit at the back of the stand at the back door as they were coming in, and I would go and pat my hat. And they would just stare at me, you know. And so I'd go up to the front, and I wouldn't say a word. And I'd just be like, yes. And I waited. Sometimes I had a couple of leaders that, if you don't mention her hat, she won't say anything. And then, oh, we love your hat. Oh, thank you. Your kindness is much appreciated. I totally did her crazy for a while. I loved it. It was so much fun. And again, it's an awareness and knowing that. She borrowed fashion from people and would literally wear it till it was in shreds. It's in other people's journals about how Mistress Paradise came to collect my gown, or I saw her in the street and this one she is worn out completely. I mean, again, researching other sources. So I would ask the gentlemen about their ball caps. We don't want them out here as much as they do back. I don't know. But anyway, and so I would, mention it was a very unusual hat. And I would say, the family crest, is that your family crest upon the hat? All right, because that's all she would know. And it would be so funny. It's a football team. I know of a team of oxen and a team of horse, but I've never heard of an animal such as a football. My servant will collect the hat tomorrow. And then I would go on. So again, they now know, oh yeah, they wouldn't have had football. You know, and again, it's personal. That was definitely doing storytelling for fun, which was not, but I tried to, that's how I do interpretation, is sort of educating through this avenue, and I tell stories. So
So
you know,
if you really
just,
want to be first person, would it be better to choose a fictional character for first person? You're not
the problem
ruining
the problem for me in doing that, and I know you said, is that it becomes more of acting, because you're making those choices. You're getting to say, oh, I want this person too. You can base it on a person, but and have a different name or you know whatever. But I would stick to knowing. So you could find a person, if, and I'm not saying change from who you were because she died, but if you wanted to go with an older person, you can find a person that sort of fills in those years. And because it's now fictional, you're portraying sort of the life of two people. I just hate just saying, oh, I'm going to totally make it up and I'm going to write this about her. We're really getting to play acting that way. The reason I love being Lucy is because I know who she is. And it changes the dynamic of your interpretation. And that was something else I mentioned, is really loving this person you choose and knowing why you love them. I totally know why I love Lucy. And I know that, but I totally know why. And it's because of her mental illness, actually. And just, it's funny, but I just feel an affinity for a very, very hard life with her. And I love that she has fun, because stories we get to reframe a bit. And in her craziness, I make her fun. She was actually a horrible woman. John Adams said he went to dinner one time at her house in England. He refused to ever go back. One guy at dinner said something she didn't like. She picked up a coffee pot, poured it all over his lap. She slapped her daughter because she missed a dance step. That was when she actually compromised her other daughter so her husband would agree to a marriage, and the daughter was probably about 13. She left her alone with the count so that the husband would have to. I mean, and then she never saw her children again, her grandchildren, because he was after money. That's why her husband had to agree. So she totally is she's manic depressive, she's something. But, you know, that's one thing about loving someone in life and who they are as human, and getting to portray them in a way that makes them better.
Well, there you go. You just do that to her.
Well, I said fill in your years, and that's what it is. I love portraying her as who she could have been, despite her hard life, because I understand what that's like. So anyway, researching around, like knowing that she was in the hospital, knowing what that's like, knowing could she be in England and be a patriot? You know, that she moved to England, but yet she supported the revolution. How did that work for her? You know, is there documents? I had a biography, so I didn't have to do that. I knew how it felt. But if I needed to look, I could have looked that up, just in England general. Were there patriots in England? Were they ridiculed? But, you know, we know what how the Loyalists were treated here. Some, but that's a different kind of situation. So researching that, and the only thing with the greetings is just starting to do the curtsy, which we have so many great interpreters that are doing that, right? The ladies, which I don't know, Dan's wife, but the ladies are definitely, and thinking, even if you're not wearing stays, getting used to, if I'm third person, I'm talking like this, my hand gestures are different, it's not a big deal. If I'm first person, I am talking to you as such. I'm probably with my fan because I'm in 4 layers clothes. Yes. And it was used. I mean, many, many years women used fans. And so I would speak to you very erect, whether I was speaking, and just getting used to what it feels like physically to be first person. Kirsty is this way, the queen's not around, so we're not doing the
How?
It's actually your heels are together and you bend your knees. Sorry. Yeah. So, and you would, I don't do this, that's like a Sound of Music, right? But you would have your hands clasped unless you were holding your fan, but you wouldn't be dangling. This is very modern. My hands would be here or used, perhaps to my side. I think here's, and a lot of that for me was mistakes.
So what is the correct greeting? Is it tomorrow?
I actually use good day. The book actually says it's only a farewell. I disagree with that. I think good day. Addressing sir, men use your humble servant a lot. Actually, Benjamin Franklin uses that. I'm uncomfortable with that as a woman. Even though it says you could, I'm just sort of like, it just feels weird to me. But you need to start thinking of how your character would address someone, who your person, what class are they? If they are below class, especially a shop person, if John Adams came by, you're not going to say good day. You're not going to address him as an equal because you're not. And that's we have to start being very politically incorrect for our time period, very correct for that one. If you address, you would say, may I be so bold as to, and you would have a purpose for that. You would not just be greeting him good day. If he spoke to you, of course you would. But so you need to start thinking of sir, madam, mistress for unmarried or married. Madam as well. The book says for unmarried, but I'm not comfortable with that either. Mistress for a younger. I don't. No, we don't have titles.
My lady.
We don't have titles here. The only one that actually would have gotten that, perhaps if you were friends with her, would have been Martha, because with the general, wasn't that a phrase that she was talked as Lady Washington? There's somebody.
So the loyalist.
No, because no one in the colonies had titles. Even if they were loyal to the crown, nobody here has titles except the royal governor. And we don't have any royal governors because they're all skedaddled because we're in the midst
I have
of
a question about the research and where do you find whether someone in the colonies, say they were loyalists, would they have still had an accent? How do you find out what they're speaking?
I consider the accent to be a choice. There is no way, with this amount of research we have, no way to know what tones were. There were phrases that you can have, and actually the book has Virginia.
And 100 years later, would they have still had that English?
The key to that, there's a couple of keys. The key to that, right, when did they come over?
Well, Anne Marbury came right from England, and she was in the 1600s. So by the time my character is now 100 years past that, but it's 3 generations later.
This is first thing, first person. Your person.
Right.
Just you. No. How long has she been in the colonies? Born in the colonies. She doesn't have an English accent.
Even though all her family was.
3 generations later, there's no way.
They know because they're all speaking, all the colonists.
Who was she around?
Dutch.
Right, that's the other thing. They're not in England.
Boston. But I mean, her father, her great, everyone, all of her family were from England. So when they
it's your personal choice, but I would never go straight English unless I was just over.
The one you can be
certainly don't call me, but
the one you can be safe with is in the woods.
It's still a
Middle
personal
Appalachians.
choice.
If they came from Scotland, they would have a Scottish accent because that actually got maintained for centuries.
well, that's what I'm wondering. If you hear your family,
It was an
is from
isolation.
England, then you
Yeah,
would
but that was
probably
isolation.
hear it.
It was the reason the Appalachian is because there's actually a storyteller that he just died like 10 years ago. Like he was telling stories when he was discovered in the 70s. He was like a 5th generation storyteller, Scots Irish. He said phrases like "egaw," which was English "egad." You can't understand him. I have a CD of him. Most people can't understand his stories at all because it is an archaic Shakespearean. And so that isolation, I don't, that's your choice.
You know, they're not going to
Accents,
say in their journals, oh, we spoke
right, exactly.
accent.
It's
So-
totally your choice. I'm very comfortable with Lucy having having what I consider an early colonies. There's not, Virginia was definitely not drawled yet, but it definitely was more genteel. It was slower. I think when I think of accents or tone, I think of more the region. Even now, like the northern is faster, more proper. Virginians, you know, the whole conversation that happens in all the letters about John Adams and how he's abrupt. Actually, that's not changed that much, surprisingly, from the northern type of people and southern type of people. But you wouldn't have a drawl, you know, if you were southern, because it still wasn't that kind of South. But there, you know, there is a properness because of the education. Right. But it's still a choice. And as long as you're a loyalist, it would confuse people if you were any more British as a people.
Yeah, right.
So the fact you're a loyalist, you could go a little heavier. And again, that's part of that interpretation. If they hear English accent, they're going to think loyalist. So you could sort of confuse some of that history.
Where she's the daughter of the governor, the royal governor, he would hang with the soldiers a bit, and they would speak with an English accent.
Yeah, but he would let his daughter.
Hang with them.
No.
You just want to.
I like to hang with them. No, but because the mobs were out to get
But
them,
you
they
are
would have
right,
been in
because the
protection of
governor,
that
how long
family.
has the governor been in place? When was he appointed by the king?
They left in 1774.
So they were traveling though, like when he got appointed by the king to be governor, was he already in the colonies?
He was also
Oh.
born in
Okay, then how did he get appointed? How did the king know of him to appoint him? Because that would be key to me. Is he doing business where he's going back and forth? And yes, your English accent would be stronger because your father's was. Is he, you know, is it a relationship? He has an uncle that lives and knows about him. Then it's not. Yeah, that would be, since he was royal governor, I would definitely,
research and appointment.
because that would make your tone much more English if there's like a constant.
He was lieutenant governor before.
Right,
So
right.
the governor who would have been sent over
Ah.
would have found him.
Then again, your conversation could be because that governor would have had, so it's not your ancestor that's giving you your tone, it's your dad's business. Because your dad was connected to an Englishman.
Right.
That actually dictates your accent a lot more than your ancestors.
And where was he from?
I don't know that she would have had that kind, because it wasn't she was conversing with an English person. Because again, it's her dad's boss.
But he was whatever he had, because he would
Right, but hers still wouldn't have been a regional because it's a combination of colony and just English. So I don't think we would have had that nuance of him. But I do think your dad would have been affected, which would have affected you.
She would have been the third generation past.
It's not,
Who came from.
yeah, but it's not about your ancestor. It is about
So
his job.
because of
And that's
who
why,
he
that's
was,
what's in research, right?
Because of who he was, she very well still may have.
He may have been struck, right, because it would have been very improper to be the lieutenant governor and your daughter doesn't speak proper. So, I mean, there's, and that's the part of the research. You need to keep it, you gotta keep it to what you as your person know. What you would have heard would not have been your fourth great grandmother. You would have heard your dad, your mom, your tutors, or your servants, or, you know, if you were growing up as a shop, you know, you like a tavern keeper, but you had indentured servants and one of them happened to be Irish, you can have a little bit of an Irish twang sometimes, you know, because they're telling stories and you're 10 years old sitting there listening, or 5, you're going to pick that up. So that's right. Well, yeah, there's no telling what your accent was. Probably more.
You would pick up more close.
Yeah. And I reenact there's a contagion. No, I'm kidding. Definitely would. But that's the kind of thing that when we think about research, it's not genealogy. And nothing against genealogy. It is important to know, but it is situation.
Okay.
Totally situational. you know. I don't think I do Lucy English enough, but I'm not good with accents, to be honest. It's one of my things as an actress that I was terrible at. I couldn't do it because I couldn't say the accent. I'm serious, I'm terrible at it. So I do her as just different, sort of an American, you know. And I do it her older, when she wasn't in it. So I feel like I get by with that. Because her formative years, she was in Virginia. So, and her peers were Virginia landowners. So that's
I'd
what
like
I'm
to spend a little more time on greetings.
Okay.
So,
So, sir,
good practice.
no, so now that we know a little bit, and the greetings are important. The reason I want to get into that is because it's sort of be the basis as we go around role playing. Is not, I want to get into greetings for roaming and first person interpretation, sort of like we would do at the festival. Not so much greetings with Isaiah as you've come to the festival and you have no idea what's happening. Sort of that kind, because it's easy to greet someone that's going to greet you back in the proper way. Because what I want to get to is first person interpretation is how do we answer those questions? How do I tell them, you know, my choices in like, how do you know, how the things that you all asked that I've said, oh, I say this about their clothes. That came because I was always conversing with people that had no idea what I was saying. And so I had to learn how to do that, what to say that would engage them. So we're just going to start with greetings. So everybody stand up. And I want you to pair off. And we'll just go over again. This is a lady with a head. Good day. Because you had to look down. Oh, I don't know if you can. That's okay. Heels together if you can.
Here, let's trade places with me so we get you on.
Under my very large dress.
Right, no one sees that.
Doesn't matter.
No one sees it. But what happens is it's your core that they are going to see. And that,
You never
and
bow.
again, you don't want to do bad history. This is proper history. So,
And would you still do that no matter what?
that you're not to someone in a lower class. I would not go up to, and I know I'm picking on you all, but your trade, and I have someone besides my parent, I would never go up to Cooper and go, good day, with a nice deep courtesy. I might go, good day, with a head. I've come to inquire about a new barrel. You barreling people, you. But I would not do, now if I was meeting even not even general, but one of my equals, then it would be much more of a, when Patrick Henry or whatever, I'd say, oh, Mr. Henry, good day to you. Definitely a deeper. And that's, so again, you have to know your class, so you would definitely curtsy to me. And I would probably only acknowledge with a head. And that's servants, you wouldn't even, right, you wouldn't even say good day to a servant.
Okay.
You would call your
So
servant.
here's my question.
Uh-huh. Again, you're a tradesman. You make Coopers. You know class. Because your situation, you do business with all classes.
Right. So as a
I
descendant-
actually would
as a
never go
descendant-
get a barrel.
Yeah, sure.
I would send my servant and you can talk to him and y'all be fine.
My
But,
question would be.
but that's, and like I said, I wouldn't, nor in normal days
That's
that
true,
would be.
because by
But
that
your
time, they weren't.
And see, we're not talking ancestors.
That's right, that's right.
And I know you all love genealogy, but we're not talking about
If it was,
ancestors.
it's like that.
But could you do business and survive without an awareness of class?
That's what I mean.
So that's good. Well, and again, you're already in America. Your situation, it's what you know in this moment, in this time. You're not 11. You're not an apprentice anymore. You are a Master Cooper, probably at your age. Right.
If not,
So it's just this moment, this moment, this now. You are probably an apprenticeship in apothecary, but you also may be an indentured servant of an apothecary.
So you're saying in order to protect their business, if an upperclassman came, they would definitely treat
I
that
would
as a
see-
class member.
But again,
If they
Gentry
want
would
the
not come
business
get a
back.
barrel.
Right.
Certainly would come get a barrel. So in reality of not having wrong
Okay.
history, I would not go buy a barrel.
But like,
True.
'cause Ben Franklin and George Washington buy all the time, and if they're making.
If you see,
any
if anyone
indication-
sees the general, you're bowing.
I
And,
don't think I would.
well, okay.
I wasn't.
You're right, maybe not.
Okay,
Well,
I just wanted to make sure.
well, I'm from Virginia, so it's, but you probably would not, and I don't know that you would have done a deep bow to this, you know, as far as being a trade, because he's not engaging you in conversation also. They do here though, probably, don't they? Yeah, and we do need to know how you would do that. He would bow to you. If you're working, you're not gonna stand up from your bucket, set it aside, and then make the bow. That would be more of a greeting. Oh, good day, sir. May I be so bold to see how your day is going? You would never ask him, may I be so bold to inquire how this good day has been for you, sir? You know, you're still, and that way you're addressing your class by saying, may I be so bold? Why? So that there's, you know, understanding that is important. You would not have a conversation. And I know that's one of the things that I hope for the festival we get to seeing, because those interactions are good, but they need to be historically accurate. So anyway, so okay, and then men, you're going to put your foot, you actually have both your feet out. Wait, I have to think about this because I don't do this very often, to be honest. No, apart, because what you're going to do is pick your best calf, and step back. And when you step back, this one stays straight, this one bends. See? It's harder than it looks, isn't it? Well, and that's, and a low back, but it's not, it's, you're sitting. Think of sitting. You're stepping on, you're gonna sit in a chair, but you've got a big, huge leg brace, like you've had knee surgery. Big, huge leg brace, and you're gonna sit down. So what you would do if I'm gonna sit down there is I would do this, and I'm down. So practice that way. So your phone. So practice that way so you get used to just not going, and like every time just get closer, you know, sort of, I will sit this time and get up.
So what they put their hands over this?
They actually would have done a hat. They would not have been like, da, da, da. I think when I've seen Jack does it well.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Dan does it really.
Kind of goes like this.
He doesn't do his hat. Jack may do the
Has
one.
his
Right.
hat or his arm.
Yeah, it's like a one hand. It's not like the, it's not the, right.
It's not that, but it's more of a good day, sir.
And you need to, men need to practice more than we do, because you're the peacocks. Well, you're the peacocks, and your bow meant something. And if you were awkward, someone would have looked and said, even if you were Gentry, they're going to think, oh, he's not, he's damaged.
See, I'm still thinking,
So,
coming from the Quakers, the hat never would have come off.
well, and again, trades, you're working.
Well,
You would not, if you were walking somewhere with them, and again, you're not stopping, you would not have stopped. They're Gentry. But you would have done
this to a lady.
Well,
Of course, maybe they would
not if you're just crossing. There would have been, the ladies would have done a head bow, the men might have done a hat, you know, or a head bow. And that's because it's a lady, not because of a class. I don't see tradesmen doing the bow while they're trade, but it's more of a, if, I want you to learn it because it's important,
right.
but I don't know that your application is as often as some other interpreters. But you still would know how.
Right. I get what you're saying. I just know.
Well, you're also out in the frontier territory, so you can do whatever you want, but anyway.
That's why you go there.
Right. We're gonna get to close. Keep coming. So is it MLM or is it 12 step? I'm not sure. Keep coming back. First step's admitting you have a problem. You're addicted to 18th century. So I want you to practice close together. You stand about this far from it. You have a big, huge leg brace on whatever leg you want to. I actually want you to sit. Because I want you to feel, because what's happening, this is what I'm seeing. And not,
How is it that we have the biggest eyes?
well, no, this is how we sit today. I also want to show us. We lean forward and we just do that. That's how we sit today. They would not have done that. Sitting would have been entirely, sitting then would have been this. So men still would have. They would not have been sloppy. So we tend to be trying to do the bow this way because we're sitting, when essence is you're just going down. Did you see? I did not bend over. Do not bend over, which is the hard part. Right. We literally couldn't, but men would not have because their posture's still. So it's a. I may be too far away because I'm short. But your feet are together, and you just bow and sit. And I don't want you to sit, but I want you to get used to that movement. That may be an easier way. I don't know how else to. No. Oh no, you were right. There was something weird about it. Not right behind, just back. Yes.
So do I turn my foot and then set it back? Or do I kind of?
I think I would say easier. Like I tend to stand as Lucy with my feet in a curtsy position because I would have had dance. That would have been a normal stance. I see the gentlemen also sort of standing. Even if they're just standing, they would stand with their best half.
So it's kind of already there.
So it's like, and you'll see Jack does that actually quite a bit, where he just stands, and that's very appropriate. Washington doesn't do it as much, but he was doing this that way. Sorry.
He's a Brit.
The idea is you have it at an angle. Like I said, I do as Lucy, so it's easy. And so it's just easy to step. And you're not going behind, you're just taking a step back, and you're not bending. Right, I was like, I know the video, people are like, what? Her feet are doing what? So, you're bowing a little. There is this, right, because you're acknowledging, the same with the head bow, you're doing that, and you've got your hat, but you're not doing our normal sit. And that's what I think people try to do, men try to do, so it becomes a little, yeah, that's perfect. You don't have to go all the way back. I mean, again, depending on who you are, knowing how to do a proper bow, based on a gentleman that may, to a lady, do a much deeper bow. You know, it's like my calf, you know, the peacock thing. But, so it's a little different. But sir and madam, my good servant, then definitely, I think men will probably do that more so. Humble, I think women would do that. Good day. What's the last name you explained? Your lady. Good day, Madam Hutchinson. I am your humble servant today. Actually, she wouldn't have because we were equals. So again, it's class. So.
But men would have, of the same class, they would have used that.
Yes, I see that in men. The book said everyone, but I see that more in men. When I say see, basically, I'm remembering what I heard working in Mansfield. I saw that a lot more with men than I did with women in their interactions.
How were the women?
Not good morning, good day, good evening.
Did women write enough letters so we can see how they signed?
I think reading letters.
Abigail did.
Right.
Yeah. But,
Right.
so that's a little different.
Women were already less class than men. So to me, that greeting of your humble servant is more of a peer recognition and humility. That's when humility is a key for that time period. Now, John Adams was humble in many things. He was also impatient. We think of him as not having humility. That's not true. He was impatient, and that came across. But I believe him to be humble from some things, you know, the fact he won his case. He wasn't like he walked around going, I won, you know. But he definitely, this is what we have to do. We need to get it done. We want to be free. But that was also Massachusetts, period. because they were getting the beginnings, if you think about it. And so I think part of that came because Virginians were just slow. That's why the South is known, is because that sort of started this it was more gentry to take things at a pace, to take their time, and you see that in the Continental Congress at that period. So that was occurring, and to be honest, a lot of that was because of heat. I mean, get down to the basics of it. You're wearing 4 layers of clothes, and you're in South Carolina in August. You're just not going to move. Right, you're just not going to move as fast. So I do think there's some location things that cause some of that, but humility was key, just in civility. The book does have some references about civil. Washington actually wrote something. You can even research just civilities of that time period. But men would have shown their humility by saying, "Your humble servant."
I was surprised to read that that was actually a salutation or goodbye. Your humble servant, and the proper response is, "I am yours, sir." That was how you said goodbye.
Yeah, but like I said, it doesn't say in the book clarifying just for men. It's, it's both. But I would be uncomfortable saying that to anybody because we already were, And I think for men it was to be on an equal ground, to show humility, because that was civil. That was a way to behave. So,
okay, we're at 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So, thank
We
you so
didn't get to engage, but when you're at home, just practice some of those greetings and sort of getting used to it with a first person and with a current. Like, don't go up to your neighbor and say that. They may call the ambulance. But if you have a friend that knows you're doing this and is not interested, but wouldn't mind helping, or, it's just how he wants to do it. Just, you've got kids, just try to greet them and just start and practice the bounds. Because to be honest, one of the things that people love about watching Dan and Jack is how comfortable they are in those mannerisms. So we have time to get comfortable in those. And so, and I'll look up about the class with the bowing, just because we do have them engage with you, which is not just to see how you might have gone about that or what you would have done in passing there. Some of you pass them a lot when you go to the church. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be deep. A deeper would be more like a higher level, definitely, or a female, that you're interested in. But it definitely, you're showing the cat, best foot forward. That's where it comes from. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right. Very good. Thank you.
I have one.
Well, once again, I have summer squash in the back of my car. And
Oh,
and rhubarb.
oh.